Chapter 25, Lead Feet. My 12th set of trackers consisted of a married team of dairy experts who were also very accomplished in other fields. Piccadilly Jane was a martial artist, and her husband, Frontier Sam, was well versed in non-lethal but put one out of action quickly and effectively handheld artillery. Over the years, I had more and more often run into savage animals and surprisingly savage people. The peaceful anarchy of most of finest Colombian had failed to control the rise of more disruptive elements in isolated sections of the planet. Since my job was to scour the entire planet, it was inevitable that I encounter such elements. Somewhere near the equator in the eastern hemisphere of the planet, we discovered a cave that seemed enticing. Markings on the interior of the walls resembled dairy cattle grazing on a pristine pasture. The sun was pictured as being high in the sky, and tenders of the herd were gathered in a circle, petting their herd dogs. It was an idyllic scene, and I wondered if we had found a clue to the dairy cow crisis. As we walked further into the cave, the tunnel became wider until we reached an area that was circular in shape. Against the back wall was an ornate table with a laptop computer positioned on top of it. Piccadilly Jane, who sometimes leaped before she considered all the circumstances, impulsively lifted the top of the laptop. Immediately, the ominous wailing of a banshee exploded into the cavernous room, and a low rumbling could be heard behind the back wall. Then the wall opened up and a huge boulder began rolling toward us. We tried to hastily retreat, but our feet seemed to be stuck in concrete. Some sort of gravitational field had taken hold of our lower extremities, and we were quite unable to move. Glancing frantically around the room, I noticed a metal box with a flashing red light on the wall to our left. Instinctively, I cried out to Frontier Sam, "Destroy that box," which I pointed to with all the gusto I could muster. Sam, a cool customer in the worst of times, coolly pulled out a handheld AK-47,000, aimed and fired. His shot was right on target, and as soon as the box was destroyed, our feet were released from the gravitational field. The boulder was coming at us with deadly intent as we were loosed from the bounds that held us to what could have been our graves. We started running, and as we passed the opening of the cave, we jumped to the side, and the boulder rolled harmlessly by. Chapter 26, Eggshells. 86 years into Project Finest Colombian, and I've covered about 80% of the planet, so 100 years, give or take a few years, was not that bad an estimate. My new team, less than a year with me, are twins, the Coming Storm and Peace in the Valley. I call them Stormy and Val, respectively. They are diametric opposites in their approach to life, which has worked out well in relation to my decision-making process. I listen carefully to both of them, and unless one is a lot more right than the other one, which happens occasionally, I then steer a middle course between the two opposing opinions. The arrangement has worked so far, and my hope is that it continues to do so during the remaining 4+ years of our scheduled time of working together. Stormy and Val are sponsored by a SNGO, supposedly non-government organization that goes by the name of Give Both War and Peace a Chance. It's run by the descendants of John Lennon and Liz Cheney. We were currently camped on the outskirts of a coffee shamba owned and operated by Carlos Pelosi, a shady character with connections to the Don't Cry for Me Argentina cartel. We were having a working supper, sitting around the campfire and planning out the next day's activities. We were eating claqueco yet again. It's customary on Finest Colombian to have claqueco at least twice a week, and while claqueco is a solid dish, I must say I am looking forward to a more varied cuisine once I eventually leave this planet. I will, however, miss the coffee. It's true that it is exported all over the cosmos, and it may be all in my mind, but I think it just somehow tastes better in country. It was Stormy's night to wash dishes, but before doing so, we wrapped up our strategy session. So, boss, you think this Pelosi fella has something to do with all the old fat cows drying up? I say we go in and blow the place up. Stormy was already collecting the dishes, etc. I don't know how many times I've said the following to Stormy, but I said again, we're not blowing the place up. Our main goal is to gather intel. CDC/Acme will decide what to do with the intel. If that means blowing up Pelosi's place, I'm all for it. Val asked, how do we gather this intel? We just walk in like we on holiday. Pelosi won't have any reason to suspect we're anything more than recreational hikers. The area we were now in was located in the planet's western hemisphere and was about 1,500 miles north of the equator. It was a beautiful area with nearby stony mountains and green rolling hills. It was late spring, and the flowers were in bloom, and time had stopped along the old canal. But the water still moved, and gondolas took young in age or at heart couples into the land beyond the clouds. What will be our cover? We'll say we want to buy eggs. Chapter 27, Desideratum. Desideratum. Okay, anyway. Next morning, after a light breakfast, we hiked over to the front gate of Pelosi's Coffee Shamba. Across the top of the gate was a neon sign flashing in gaudy colors the following slogan: if it ain't Rosie, then it ain't Pelosi. Stormy said, what's this guy up to, boss? Pretending to be some kind of George W. Universe? Universe was a legend on many worlds, known for his love of people and love of life. Makes me mad. Let's blow this place up. When will you ever get it through your thick skull that violence is not always the answer? Val replied in such a decisive manner that I didn't feel it necessary to respond. As we got closer to the gate, two heavily armed guards ordered us to stop. The largest specimen of the two spoke to us. What brings you to Pelosi's plantation? We're here to buy eggs. We heard on the grapevine that Pelosi eggs were the finest in the county. I spoke in a respectful tone. What do you mean grapevine? This isn't wine country. That's 200 miles to the west. The guest literally had a literal mind. The guard literally had a literal mind. I ignored the comment and pressed forward with the eggs inquiry. How about those eggs? We're in the market for at least 2 dozen. The smaller and probably the smarter of the two guards spoke up. We could sell you at most 1 dozen. Take it or leave it. I could tell by his tone no negotiating would be taking place. We'll take it. Arriving back in camp, Stormy exclaimed, oh boy, eggs, let's have them for supper. No claqueco tonight. I replied, we can have 3 each. The other 3 are going to the FCDC lab in Ernestine. Be back in 5 minutes. I carefully placed 3 of the eggs in a protective plastic container, reactivated the SPNV, and wheeled myself to the FCDC lab, where I left them with a trusted lab technician. I gave him instructions on what I wanted him to test for. I then returned via SPNV to the camp. I was greeted by Val with the following question. How do you want your eggs cooked? Over medium, I responded. Just like Val and Stormy, I was looking forward to something different for supper. Both Val and Stormy were good cooks. They even planned to open a restaurant in Ernestine someday. They plan to offer an alternative to claqueco, and by the time that happens, I'm hoping the Ernestians will be open-minded to mixing up their diets a little bit. Change can be hard, but it's oftentimes for the best. Over supper, Val asked me, hey, boss, can you give us a hint on your thinking concerning the eggs? Inquiring minds want to know, Stormy added. We all laughed. Stormy could be both violent and funny. It's just a hunch, you understand, but my TPE over the past few months around the campfire had told them about some of my exports working as a theological private eye. Training is telling me that someone or some group is pushing chickens. One of the main ways of doing that is by degrading the value of dairy cattle. Just a hunch, but over the millennia, I've learned it's usually a good idea to play my hunches. We finished supper, cleaned up, and called it a night.